Welcome to Alchemist Tribune Deep Dives, hosted by the Academic Renegade. We're here to share insights and analysis from the latest articles in the Alchemist Tribune. Each week, we explore how doctorate holders are transforming academic expertise into entrepreneurial success. Let's dive in.
Today we're exploring a fascinating piece about team building for academic entrepreneurs. You know, there's this persistent myth in academia that brilliant minds work best in isolation, the lone genius in their ivory tower. But this article completely dismantles that notion.
Absolutely. What struck me immediately was how the author frames team building not as a nice-to-have, but as an absolute necessity. They use this powerful metaphor of a lifeboat in turbulent waters when describing how a strong team supports academic entrepreneurs navigating research and innovation challenges.
That metaphor really resonates because it captures the reality that most doctoral graduates face when they transition from pure research to entrepreneurial ventures. The skill sets required are dramatically different, and frankly, no single person can master them all effectively.
Exactly. And the article makes a compelling case for why diverse perspectives are absolutely crucial. They compare it to mixing colors on a palette. The more varied the colors, the more vibrant the outcome. In my experience working with interdisciplinary research teams, I've seen this principle in action countless times.
Can you elaborate on that? Because I think many academics struggle with the idea of bringing in people from completely different fields.
Well, consider a typical scenario. You have a computer scientist developing an AI application for healthcare. If they work in isolation, they might create something technically brilliant but practically useless because they don't understand clinical workflows, regulatory requirements, or patient psychology. But bring in a physician, a regulatory expert, and maybe a behavioral psychologist, and suddenly you have the foundation for something truly transformative.
That's such a concrete example of what the article means when it talks about groundbreaking ideas emerging from collaboration. But here's what I find particularly insightful. The piece doesn't just celebrate diversity for its own sake. It specifically addresses the management challenges that come with leading diverse teams.
Right, and this is where many academic entrepreneurs stumble. The article identifies 3 critical management skills: effective communication, conflict resolution, and leadership. But what I appreciate is how they reframe conflict resolution. Instead of viewing conflicts as setbacks, they encourage seeing them as opportunities for growth.
That's sophisticated thinking. In academic settings, we're often conflict averse because we're trained to seek consensus through evidence and logic. But entrepreneurial environments are messier. You're dealing with uncertainty, time pressure, and competing priorities. The ability to navigate conflict constructively becomes a competitive advantage.
And notice how they emphasize emotional intelligence as a component of leadership. This isn't traditionally emphasized in doctoral training, but it's absolutely essential when you're trying to inspire and motivate a team toward a shared vision. The quote from Ronald Reagan really captures this. The greatest leader is not necessarily the one who does the greatest things. He is the one that gets the people to do the greatest things.
What I find particularly actionable is their discussion of team culture. They break it down into very specific implementable strategies, promoting open communication, encouraging brainstorming sessions, setting clear expectations. But the underlying principle is what Peter Drucker meant when he said, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast."
Can you unpack that for our listeners who might not be familiar with that concept?
Certainly. Drucker's point is that you can have the most brilliant strategy in the world, but if your team culture doesn't support executing that strategy, you'll fail. In an academic context, think about all the research projects that fail, not because the science was bad, but because the team couldn't work together effectively, or because there wasn't clear communication about roles and expectations.
This connects beautifully to the section on empowerment. The article presents this fascinating paradox captured in Rachel O'Meara's quote, "Empowerment is all about letting go so that others can get going." For academics used to being the expert in the room, this can be genuinely challenging.
It requires a fundamental shift in mindset. In traditional academic hierarchies, knowledge is power, and you advance by demonstrating your expertise. But in entrepreneurial teams, your success depends on how effectively you can leverage other people's expertise. You have to become comfortable with not being the smartest person in the room about everything.
And the article provides concrete mechanisms for this through mentoring programs. What's clever about their approach is that mentoring becomes bidirectional. It's not just senior people teaching junior people, but creating structures for knowledge sharing across different areas of expertise.
This ties into one of the most important points in the entire piece, connecting individual roles to the overall mission. In academic research, the connection between your specific work and broader impact can sometimes feel abstract. But in entrepreneurial ventures, everyone needs to understand how their contribution drives toward concrete outcomes.
The measurement section really brings this home. The article advocates for 360-degree feedback mechanisms, which creates accountability while fostering continuous improvement. But what I find most valuable is their emphasis on celebrating small wins along the way.
That's crucial because entrepreneurial ventures, especially those emerging from academic research, often have long development cycles. If you only celebrate the final outcome, team morale can suffer during those inevitable periods when progress feels slow or uncertain.
Speaking of progress measurement, I was struck by how they frame metrics alignment. It's not just about tracking productivity. It's about ensuring everyone understands how their work contributes to larger objectives. This creates what they call a roadmap for the team to follow.
This is where academic entrepreneurs often struggle because we're trained to pursue knowledge for its own sake. But in entrepreneurial contexts, everything needs to be purpose-driven and outcome-oriented. The metrics help maintain that focus while providing regular feedback loops.
What's particularly sophisticated about their approach is recognizing that performance measurement isn't just about numbers. It's about fostering a culture of growth and collaboration. The 360-degree feedback isn't punitive, it's developmental.
And this brings us back to the fundamental thesis of the article. Team building for academic entrepreneurs isn't just about getting work done more efficiently. It's about creating an environment where innovation can flourish. The quote from Ifeanyi Enoch Onuoha really captures this. Teamwork is the secret that makes common people achieve uncommon results.
But here's what I find most compelling. The article suggests that the team-building skills academic entrepreneurs develop aren't just useful for their immediate ventures. These are transferable leadership competencies that enhance their effectiveness in any collaborative environment.
Absolutely. Whether you're leading a research consortium, managing a university department, or building a startup, the fundamental principles remain the same. Clear communication, empowerment, accountability, and a shared sense of purpose.
One thing we haven't discussed yet is the practical challenge of assembling these teams. Academic entrepreneurs often have limited resources and networks. How do you attract high-quality team members when you can't offer Silicon Valley compensation packages?
That's where the mission connection becomes crucial. People, especially highly skilled professionals, want to work on something meaningful. Academic entrepreneurs often have the advantage of working on problems with significant social impact, whether that's advancing healthcare, addressing climate change, or improving education. That sense of purpose can be incredibly motivating.
Plus, the mentoring and empowerment aspects we discussed create intrinsic rewards. People want opportunities to grow, to take on responsibility, to work autonomously. If you can provide those experiences while working toward a meaningful mission, you can compete effectively for talent even without premium compensation.
The article also implicitly addresses another challenge. Many academic entrepreneurs are introverts who are more comfortable with ideas than with people management. But the strategies they outline, structured feedback sessions, clear role definitions, regular check-ins, provide frameworks that make team leadership more systematic and less dependent on natural charisma.
That's a really important point. Academic entrepreneurship doesn't require you to become a different person. It requires you to develop systems and structures that enable effective collaboration. The article provides a roadmap for that development.
And ultimately, what's most encouraging about this piece is how it positions team building not as a departure from academic values, but as an extension of them. The emphasis on diverse perspectives, evidence-based decision-making, continuous learning, and collaborative knowledge creation, these are fundamentally academic principles applied in entrepreneurial contexts.
It's about building bridges, as the title suggests. Bridges between academic expertise and entrepreneurial execution, between individual brilliance and collective achievement, between research insights and real-world impact.
For our listeners who are considering this transition, I think the key takeaway is that you don't have to choose between intellectual rigor and practical impact. The most successful academic entrepreneurs are those who can harness the collaborative power of diverse teams while maintaining the analytical depth that defines excellent scholarship.
And the skills required, communication, empowerment, performance measurement, culture building, These are learnable competencies. They require practice and development, just like any other professional skill. The article provides a framework for that development.
What's exciting is imagining the innovations that could emerge when more academic entrepreneurs master these team-building principles. We're talking about accelerating the translation of research insights into solutions that can address society's most pressing challenges.
Thanks for joining us on Alchemist Tribune Deep Dives. We're the academic renegade crew reminding you that your doctorate is more than a degree. It's your launchpad to entrepreneurial success. For more insights, visit us at the Alchemist Tribune, where we're bridging the gap between academia and enterprise. Until next time, keep innovating.